Hi, this is Terry Bates again from the Cornell Lake Erie Research and Extension Lab, and we're going to talk again a little bit more about the MyEV platform. Today, we're going to be talking about block level data recording. As always, you can go to efficientvineyard.com to find out about information on how to use the software. And so, what is MyEV? It's basically an outreach software tool. So it's a web-based free platform for growers to start working with spatial data on their farm. You can go to the MyEV documentation page that gives you basically a manual on how to use the software. You can also go to the viticulture blog site where you might be listening to this video on, where I talk about practical use of the software in vineyards and how we use it in our management. So you can always go to the MyEV tool, the big red button in the corner of the web platform, and start building your own farm. Okay, so just to orient you, what does MyEV do? So the first thing is you just want to build your farm. That means drawing your farm blocks and start entering data on those farm blocks, and that's what we'll be talking more about today. So just to give you a frame of reference, so ultimately what we want to do is process spatial data and be able to make better management decisions and spatial management decisions in our vineyard. So we start by importing data. So whether that's collected from a sensor or from a data collector on your cell phone, some spatial data that is collected in the field, we need to process that and clean it up, and then interpolate it. And there are reasons we do that, and we can get into other videos on why we do that. But once you understand the spatial pattern in that vineyard, so you have a relative map that's not necessarily telling you anything about the viticulture, such as an NDVI sensor measurement. You get high, medium, and low, but it doesn't necessarily tell you anything. But you can do field sampling against that pattern and translate that map into a viticulture map. For example, you can translate NDVI into yield, or NDVI at a different time of the season into pruning weight, and be able to use that in your management. The other tools, kind of more advanced, is if I go through that process of collecting data, validating that data in the field. So in this case, I'll use the example of nutrition. If I have a soil sensor, a canopy sensor, and a yield sensor, and I go and I validate those so that I know what my, say, potassium availability, my potassium uptake, and my potassium demand is of that vineyard. If I understand those things, that helps me make a better management decision on how much fertilizer to apply. So we fuse that data together in a tool called a data joiner, and then we use multivariate zoning, which just basically gives you statistically different zones in that field, which you can apply your variable rate management, export that prescription map into your favorite ag software that controls variable rate equipment in the field. So ultimately, that's what we're after, is this spatial data driven variable rate management in the vineyard that just, does a better job of management. It's more efficient all the way around. So I know most people aren't there yet. So let's back this baby up and go all the way back to block level data recording. Okay, so I pull up to my MyEV website and I hit the MyEV tool button in the corner, and that'll bring me to my default farm. If you do not have an account set up, it'll bring you to a jump page so that you can set up an account and start building your farm. But in this case, I have a farm. To navigate around the MyEV platform, as I always say, the big green button in the upper left-hand corner is all about your farm, all the information about that farm, its location, its owner, if you have collaborators, and anything about the block level data that you have in your farm is going to be in this big green button up here. Then there's other buttons that have to do with spatial data and the tools. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can give us some feedback if you've catch a bug that we need to fix, or you have a question, you can contact us there. This little person down in the corner is everything about you, your user settings. There are navigation tools, and then the data collector. So today, what I'm going to talk about really is anything under this green button. I'm not going to use any of the other controls. I'm just talking about block, information on my farm and the blocks on my farm. So to do this, I set up a different farm called the Clairol Teaching Farm, and let's go to that one. Okay, so most of you, when you set up your farm and you draw your farm blocks, you're going to get something that looks fairly blank. So all the blocks are colored a particular color and there's no labels on them, and you're like, okay, so what is this telling me? It's not telling me very much. So again, everything we're talking about is in the big green button in the corner that it tells me everything about my farm. So I click on that. What I want to show you is this list view. So every block that I've drawn, so every purple block there, so any one of these purple blocks, I can click on one of them, is basically a spreadsheet with headers, right? And those headers, you're going to have your block name, you're going to have a description of that block, and then it has stuff in it that I set up when I set up the blocks, right? So it automatically calculates the area. I entered what the variety was for that particular block, what the row spacing was. So and you can have, as you set up your blocks, you can put any of those attributes in that you want. And then you can color by those blocks. So in a spreadsheet view, it looks something like this, right? Here's the name of the block, the description, the area, the year planted, the row spacing. So really what MyEV is doing is you're visualizing what a spreadsheet looks like. And then you can, what we call these things at the top as headers or attributes, and you can visualize your farm by any one of these attributes. And in this case, most likely we're going to do variety or block name. So all the blocks are colored purple. And so we have a block color setting, and it's solid and they're all purple. But if I want to color them based on a value, in this case, variety, so the different varieties on my farm are colored differently. And then I can label those blocks. So there's a block labeling. So no label, block name, or header value. I want to label it by header value. And it'll give you two options. So you can label every block by two things, right? We probably could make this like you could label 10 things on a particular block, but it just get a little confusing. So we limited it to two. In this case, you know, we're naming it by variety. You could put the block name with it, or you could put the area. So like this particular block is a Concord block of 6.39 acres. Okay, so what I want to show you is how do I start adding new data to these blocks? So a new attribute or a new header value to the blocks. And I will show you how to do that. So for this particular example, let's say next year I want to apply nitrogen fertilizer, and I want to apply it at different rates. I want to, you know, my Concord, I want to apply 50 pounds of nitrogen to my Concord blocks, and then I want to apply 25 pounds of nitrogen to my other blocks, my Niagara, my Vignoles, Ives, for, you know, let's just go with that. So there's what I want to do is I want to add an attribute to the blocks. So I click on my farms and I go to my gear, or my settings, and here are all those headers. So anything that was on that spreadsheet going across the top is a header value. And I want to add a block header, and we're going to call it nitrogen. It's going to be a number. And I could put like a min and a max and step, like say I wanted to go from 0 to 200 pounds of nitrogen by 25 pound increments. I could put that in here, but if I leave them all blank, then it just allows me to put in whatever number I want. So let's just make it simple and go with that. So I'm going to have a nitrogen rate. It's going to be a number, and that's what I want to put in that column for each one of those blocks. So I add that header. And then I say, so you see down here, I've added this header called nitrogen, and I save it. And it recompiles my blocks with that new information, even though I haven't actually added any data yet. I've just added that header. And if I click on any one of these blocks, again, you can see all the header values, and this nitrogen one is now blank because I haven't added any data yet. So how do we add the data? I can do this by clicking on any individual block, right? And then I can edit that block. So I'm taking this block, I'm editing any of the data that I want in there. So in this particular block, I want to add 50 pounds of nitrogen for next year, and I hit save. And I can do that for any one of these blocks. So if I say go to this IVES block, I edit the block, I go to my nitrogen value, and now I want to put in 25 pounds of actual nitrogen in that particular block, and I save it. It's that simple, right? And you could do this for anything you want to collect data on for that particular block. If you want to put in that you put on a certain rate of fertilizer, or you put on what was your first spray, what was the chemical, what was the date, if you have farm work that needs to be done in a particular block, you make a header for what needs to be accomplished in that block and maybe what date you want it accomplished by, and then you can share that information with your farm workers. So any data you want to put on those blocks, you do the same way, and you can go through and click every individual block and add that data. So that's method number one. Click on an individual block and enter the data. It's that simple. But for many of you who have many blocks, so that would work. So say if I had a farm with 10 blocks, yeah, okay, I can click through every block, add the data I want, and save it. But say I have 50 blocks, 100 blocks or more, and I want to bulk upload that data. There's a way to do that as well. So again, I'll go to my big green button in the top that talks about my farm and all my block data. I'm going to go to this list view, and it basically pulls up the spreadsheet for the blocks on that farm. This kind of up-down arrow lets you sort that data by that header value. So by variety, it's going to do alphabetical. By acres, it's going to either go ascending or descending order. But I can sort these and say for all my Concord blocks, I want to say that was 50 pounds of nitrogen for each one. Okay, so one way to do this is just go through and click all my Concord blocks. Anything that says Concord here, I'm clicking to select that block. This might be really good if you're going to say, I'm going to put on a spray application and I'm going to do all my Concords today, and I'm going to do all my wine grapes tomorrow. And I want to put in what chemical so I can just select, okay, all my Concords are getting sprayed today with this particular chemical, and I can have a header for what that spray is. So I can keep a record of it. Okay, so I've gone through, I've selected my Concord blocks. I hit bulk update selected blocks. It's going to say, okay, what do you want to update? I want to update the nitrogen because I'm doing my nitrogen fertilizer. And all these are going to get 50 pounds of nitrogen. And I hit apply, and it's going to say, yes, do you want to do that? Then it compiles all those, and let's take a view of nitrogen. Okay, so now we can see, if I've labeled it by the nitrogen value, I can see that all my Concord blocks have been labeled with 50 pounds. So I'm going to put on 50 pounds of nitrogen on those fields. It has zeros for everything else. So another way to do this, kind of the same technique, bulk updating of data, but in a more visual sense. I go again to my list view. So I've clicked on my Clairol teaching farm. It's going to bring up all my block information. It's all colored by variety. I go to this list view again, and then select on a map. So I can select whatever block I want by hitting a little checkbox, or if I want to select all the blocks, I just hit that little button in the upper corner. But say I want to do this visually, so I go select on a map, and now I can select whatever blocks I want to update on this map. So I'm going to do my Niagaras, my Vignoles. These are Vincent and Ives. So let's pull out my different wine grape varieties and say, okay, now I'm going to go fertilize those, but I only want to fertilize with 25 pounds of nitrogen, right? I update my selected blocks. What do I want to update? I want to update the nitrogen level, and I want to put on 25 pounds of actual nitrogen, hit apply. Yes. And then it's updating those blocks. And now you can see that it's updated those values. So all the Concords are fertilized with 50 pounds of nitrogen, and all these wine grapes are with 25 pounds of nitrogen. And again, this could be anything that you want. Maybe you don't even fertilize with nitrogen. Maybe you want to do it for, workload or scouting or whatever it is that you want to collect. Crop estimations, another great one. You can go out and crop estimate each block and put in the value of what you think your tons per acre are in each one of those blocks. Okay, so that is really two ways of doing it. One is you click on every individual block and update that attribute. So create the attribute or the header for nitrogen in this case. So create the attribute, and then you can update that attribute by either clicking on every block or going to the list view underneath the farm button. And you can either select your blocks by clicking the little square on the next to each box, or you can select it off the map and select those blocks and then update the field to do kind of a batch or a bulk update of the blocks. Now, there's a third way to do it for you more advanced users who like working in Excel and say you want to do further calculations. The one I always use is if I have a validated yield map and a validated pruning weight map, and I say I had yield and pruning weight on each one of those blocks, and I wanted to calculate what the Ravaz index was, which is the yield to pruning weight ratio. I can pull that information into Excel, do the math in Excel, and then re-upload the data back to MyEV. So let me show you how you do that. So again, I'm just going to the big green button in the upper corner. I'm going to download the data. So it's going to download the block level data for this farm. So it doesn't have anything to do with spatial data or sensors or anything like that. It's just this information that I have put into each one of my blocks. It's going to download that data. And I'm going to ask it to do it as a CSV, so a comma separated value, which is basically an Excel sheet. You can download it as a GeoJSON, which is a GIS type file, or you can print it. But I'm going to download it as a CSV, and let me get my face out of the way, and you'll see that it went to my downloads folder on my desktop. And it opened it for me. Okay, so it looks something like this. Let me format auto fit column width so I can see what's in all the. All right, so every block has a unique block ID. Don't change it, don't touch it. Don't ever change this, because that's what MyEV uses to identify that block as a unique, it's its fingerprint. So don't screw with your fingerprints, leave those alone. But you have the name of the block, the description, when it was created, right? The area, everything we've already put in there, year planted, row spacing, vine spacing. Okay, nitrogen, this is the attribute that we added, and you can see all the values that we've updated. So say I want to change these. Say I've had a change of heart, and I only want to put 30 pounds of nitrogen on my Concords. So just like doing it in MyEV, you can sort this data. So I selected all the data by clicking on the box in the upper left-hand corner. And then I will sort. I want to sort it by variety so that it's easy for me. So my data, you have to check this little box that says my data has headers, right? These are all headers. My data does have headers, and I want to select it by variety. And it'll sort that data by variety. So you'll see that all my Concord are all in one spot. Okay, so say I want to change these now. I only want to put down 30 pounds of actual nitrogen because I did some soil sampling and I realized I had a more organic matter than I thought I had, and it's releasing more nitrogen. And I've been listening to Terry Bates do nitrogen research for 20 years and whatever. We're going to put on less nitrogen because we're getting more nitrogen from the mineralization of organic matter in our soils. So I change this. So I changed all these values from 50 pounds of nitrogen to 30 pounds of nitrogen, and I'm going to save this file because I've now updated it. I save it, and it says, you want to save it as a CSV file? Yes. It wants to turn it into an actual Excel file, but we don't want to do that because we want to import it into MyEV as a CSV because that's the most simple form of a spreadsheet. And so we hit yes, and then I can close that. Okay, so now I'm still looking at old values because I haven't updated anything. I have to re-import that data. So I downloaded the data, I changed the values, and now I want to upload the data back to my farm. So again, I go to the big green button, and now I hit import. So I exported before, and now I'm going to import data. I'm going to choose that file, and in this particular case, it's going to be in my downloads folder, and it's Clairol Teaching Farm. And I open that, and it's going to ask me some questions like, do you really want to do this? And what are the things you want to sync? And we want to make sure, yep, I want to sync this, make sure that that nitrogen is checked. And I import that, and it says, yes, I want to do that. And it's going to recompile those blocks. And now you'll see that all my Concord blocks have been updated with 30 pounds of nitrogen instead of 50. Okay, so that's it. That is block level data recording, both individually. So again, create your attribute, and you do that. You go to under your farm button, you go to your settings. Here are all your attributes. I created the attribute of nitrogen, and then I updated the values within that by either clicking on an individual block and editing the block to change the nitrogen, or I go to list view and I can select the blocks that I want to update and then do a bulk update of my selected blocks, or I select it off of the map and I click on the blocks I want to update, hit bulk update of selected blocks, change that value. And the last way is I can take all that block level information, I can download it into an Excel file, put in whatever data I want, and then import it back to MyEV and update all those files. And then I can, again, visualize by whatever values I want. Like now, say, instead of by variety, I want to visualize by how much nitrogen I'm going to put on those fields. And so it just changes the colors. And then if you want to share that with anybody on your farm, you hit the collaborators button and you put in their MyEV account address. So the email that they use to set up their MyEV account, you put that in there and you invite them to that farm. And so then they would be able to see it on their cell phone if they're out in the field. Okay, so just to give you an idea what that looks like. So in this little mini window, this is my phone screen. So this is what MyEV in this particular case, looking at this farm, is going to look like on my phone. So again, if you're out in the field or if you're sharing your farm with somebody and they want to see what you've done, or they want to see, what the block level information is on their phone while they're in the field, again, it looks very much like the desktop version. There are some limited functions when you're on your cell phone, but we've made it so it's a little bit easier to use in the field. But the same thing, here's my farm button. If I want to color those blocks by some other value, or I want to label, in this particular case, I want to label what the nitrogen value is for those different blocks. I can see that, if I'm the person out in the field doing the fertilizing, I know which fields get 30 pounds of actual nitrogen and which ones get 25. And when you're in the field, you can always hit this navigation button, and it'll GPS you your location in the vineyard. So if I'm in the middle of railroad block here, or I walk up to the edge of that block and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I have to put on 30 pounds or 20 pounds or 25 pounds of nitrogen, I can be like, oh, I'm standing in front of the block that requires 30 pounds of nitrogen. I need to set up my fertilizer machine to deliver that much fertilizer. It'll also work if you're in the field and you want to change a value of one of your attributes. So again, I will click on that block. Say, I get out there and, 30 pounds, the vines are really weak, and it's like, yeah, they need more than 30 pounds. And we want to switch that back to 50 pounds of nitrogen for that particular field. I click on the block, I edit the block. Okay, I've changed my 30 pounds back to 50 pounds. I hit save. Okay, so now we can see that I've changed the value from this block from 30 pounds of nitrogen back to 50 pounds of nitrogen. And so I've done this in the field, and I've, I've refreshed my screen. So now if I'm back at my desktop, I hit the refresh button. I can either reload it or I can hit the refresh button over here on the side. And now you can see that that's been updated. Okay, so that is block level data recording. If you ever have any questions, you can go to the bullhorn down here in MyEV and ask us a question. That just brings up a pop-up window, and just put in a message there and we'll try to get back to you. Or you can email me at trb7@cornell.edu. Thanks.